My name is Craig Booth. I was falsely accused by my ex-wife of some horrific charges. I went to trial. I refused to take a plea from the prosecution, and I was acquitted in 15 minutes by a jury. When I first heard about the charges and knew about the charges, I was at work at UPS, and the officer showed up, arrested me. I had no idea what for. It wasn't until later on that I understood the full scope, and being in jail for the time frame, I met with a public defender, and she told me the charges and the sentence that it carried. My heart literally sunk into my gut. If I had knots in my stomach thinking, what the heck? What are these? Where did she get these allegations even from? You hear of people being wrongfully convicted and spending however long in prison, and then finally something occurs where they're found innocent. And in my mind, I'm thinking, what if this happens? How can this occur? So on and so forth. And just the emotions that I felt during that year. Anybody could be accused, right? The whole innocent until proven guilty. I'm sorry, it's not. It doesn't work that way. They may say it, and yeah, we like to think that our justice system is like that, but anybody can be charged over an allegation because somebody says something. My opinion on the criminal justice system is that it needs some work, for sure. To feel guilty, to be accused of such horrific crime, and to go through that type of situation, I feel sorry for people that are innocent that have been wrongly convicted because there's not enough evidence or there's manipulation of certain things within the system. For myself, with Ron Podboy and his team, honestly, I don't know if I would be here right now in this moment if it wasn't for him and his team.
Prosecutors and cops are sworn to protect and uphold the law and follow the rules. When they don't, when they lie, hide, and destroy evidence, and basically don't follow the rules, you get a Craig Booth injustice tragedy of an outstanding, innocent man who was falsely accused of sex crimes by his ex-wife to gain leverage in their divorce. It can happen to any one of us. It can happen to you. Every year, there are hundreds of cases of prosecutorial misconduct, false arrest, and wrongful convictions that can happen in our justice system. Some prosecutors, police officials, and politicians with personal agendas call press conferences to launch inflammatory and usually false or grossly exaggerated claims about the importance of a given case, totally ignoring the facts in a rush to judgment. Examples are legion. Although the goal of every justice system is to provide fair and impartial judgments, more often than not, it doesn't work out that way. Either because of concealed evidence, people being framed, or corrupt law enforcement. Prosecutors are the most powerful players in the American criminal justice system. Their decisions, like whom to charge with a crime and what sentences to seek, have profound consequences. So why is it so hard to keep them from breaking the law or violating the Constitution? The short answer is that they are almost never held accountable for misconduct, even when it results in wrongful convictions. It's time for a new approach to ending this behavior. Federal oversight of prosecutors' offices that repeatedly ignore defendants' legal and constitutional rights. There is a successful model for this in the Justice Department's monitoring of police departments with histories of misconduct. Among the most serious prosecutorial violations is the withholding of evidence that could help a defendant prove his or her innocence or get a reduced sentence, a practice so widespread that one federal judge called it an epidemic. Under the 1963 landmark Supreme Court case Brady versus Maryland, prosecutors are required to turn over any exculpatory evidence to a defendant that could materially affect a verdict or sentence. Yet in many district attorneys' offices, the Brady rule is considered nothing more than a suggestion, with prosecutors routinely holding back such evidence to win their cases. State courts often fail to hold prosecutors accountable, even when their wrongdoing is clear. And individual prosecutors are protected from civil lawsuits while criminal punishment is virtually unheard of. Money damages levied against a prosecutor's office could deter some misconduct, but the Supreme Court has made it extremely difficult for wrongfully convicted citizens to win such claims. This maddening situation has long resisted a solution. What would make good sense is to have the federal government step in to monitor some of the worst actors, increasing the chance of catching misconduct before it ruins people's lives. The Justice Department is already authorized to do this by a 1994 federal law prohibiting any pattern or practice of conduct by law enforcement officers that deprives a person of legal or constitutional rights. The department has used this power to monitor police departments in Los Angeles, New Orleans, Detroit, and Seattle, among other municipalities, with a history of brutality, wrongful arrests, shootings of unarmed citizens, and other illegal or unconstitutional practices. For the most part, the results have been positive. Since prosecutors are also law enforcement officers, there is no reason they and their offices should be immune from federal oversight. In this insider-exclusive network TV special, Presumed Guilty Until Proven Innocent, Craig Booth's story, our news team meets with Ron Podboy at the Ronald Podboy Law Firm, who successfully represented Craig Booth when he was falsely accused by his ex-wife of sexual assault and domestic violence, which he did not commit. The last thing anybody wants to face is being wrongfully accused of a crime, but unfortunately it can happen. A witness or victim can identify the wrong person. Circumstances can lead police to think that an innocent suspect committed a crime. And an innocent person can even be formally charged with a crime he did not commit. Ron is a former Denver prosecutor and an extremely successful criminal and civil trial lawyer. And he's seen and knows both sides of the law and will discuss. What legal options do you have after being accused, prosecuted, then exonerated for a crime you did not commit? What if you are falsely accused? What not to do? So let's assume that you are accused. What do you do? And equally important, what do you not do? How do you protect yourself and your family? Remember, it doesn't matter if the accusations are a lie. Cops and prosecutors lie all the time. And bad cops and bad prosecutors don't care if you are innocent or guilty. They've already decided you're guilty, and they don't care about the truth. So don't assume the people in the system will be fair. Americans like to believe that this is a country where fairness and justice reign. That's nonsense. But most people don't discover just how bad things are until they are charged with something they did not do. Now, there are hundreds of thousands of legitimately reported and rightfully prosecuted sex crime cases across the country on any given year. And without question, those cases are incredibly sad to hear about. This insider-exclusive network TV special is not meant to take away from all those victims who are given justice by the prosecution of sexual offenders who have been proven to commit sex-based crimes. Rather, this network TV special is meant to address those occasions when sex-based accusations are not authentic and are done for ignorant, nefarious, and/or unconscionable reasons. As everybody knows, false accusations can ruin a life, and that's why this network TV special was produced and broadcast. So why is a false accusation so terrible? More often than not, when anybody hears that someone they knows or sees on the news that someone has been accused of a sex crime, that person almost in the same thought immediately assumes that person is guilty. After all, who gets accused of a sex crime they didn't commit, right? Unfortunately, many people fall prey to false accusations. But why would someone falsely accuse someone of a sex crime, right? Be it for vindictive reasons, forgetfulness, intoxication, and/or excusatory reasons, you'd be surprised how often it happens. That's why it's often said that sex crimes are easily filed, easily charged, are equally hard to fight and defend, but nevertheless, they have life-lasting ramifications. The Duke lacrosse is an unfortunate example of this. These falsely accused victims could be you or me one day. And if you are so unlucky, you will quickly find out that justice in America is a hard-won battle where very few police departments, law enforcement agencies, prosecuting attorneys, and prison officials do the right thing. when they are wrong. And you need an experienced and passionate trial lawyer like Ron Podboy, who has successfully fought these battles to get his clients the justice they deserve. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Denver, Colorado. It is my great pleasure to introduce Ron Podboy to the show again. Welcome to the show, Ron.
Thank you, Steve. Good to be here.
Tell our audience a little bit about your law firm. What type of law do you practice?
Steve, mostly criminal. Why? Because I cut my teeth on criminal as a prosecutor, and I enjoy it the most. But also do personal injury, wrongful death, employment cases. So used to do some divorce. Don't do divorce anymore. And just not fun.
Today we're here about one of your clients, Craig Booth, who was falsely charged by his ex-wife of various horrific crimes. You represented him. He was acquitted, thank God. We're going to tell his story, but tell our audience first, who is Craig Booth?
To me, was a regular guy. He was a UPS driver, nice guy, and charged with really tough crimes. And I say that because here in Colorado, we have very heavy penalties for felony sex assault. He was charged with felony sex assault and also felony unlawful sexual contact. Back in the late 90s, the law changed in Colorado. Here's how it changed. If you are sentenced on a felony to Department of Corrections, DOC, for 2 years, it's 2 years to life. If you're sentenced 4 years, it's 4 years to life. And the Department of Corrections basically gets to decide whether or not you're going to be allowed to have parole. So it's a very tough schema.
Let me get this straight here. So a judge sentences you to 2 years on a felony. Any felony?
Certain sex felonies. Unlawful sexual contact, not sex assault, but unlawful sexual contact, yes.
Then the individuals who can determine how long you're going to stay in prison now is transferred to the Department of Corrections.
After you're sentenced. And with the charge of unlawful sexual contact, it's a 5-year mini. So you're going to get 5 years, and that's going to be 5 years to life if you're convicted. It's mandatory.
Question, how is that constitutional in terms of an indeterminate sentence?
That's another question. Ask me on another show, long answer. But it is constitutional to do that. The short answer is, hey, the legislature put that law in place, and they can put a sentencing structure in place as they choose.
Now, what were the accusations specifically? And it was by his now ex-wife, but they were going through a divorce at the time, correct?
Well, when it was filed, the divorce had already been filed. Craig didn't have knowledge that this was coming. As a matter of fact, I have a photograph which he gave me of them at a ball game down here in Denver watching the Rockies, which they attended after the divorce was filed and before Craig knew he was going to be arrested on what she had reported to the police.
Let's talk the specifics. He didn't know that she was filing these claims with the police, these false allegations. I understand she went to the police with her new boyfriend at the time.
No, that's correct. And she alleged that she was assaulted in the shower. Her nipples were pulled painfully. Digital intrusion or hand to the vagina. Craig explained to me what went on there. They had a certain style of foreplay. He thought sex would help out their situation in terms of interpersonal relationship, started to get sexy in the shower. She turned down his advances. He stopped. He got out of the shower, dried off, and that was that. But she used that behavior to say, oh, I was assaulted. And it wasn't consensual. And I didn't permit that. Where the truth was, it was really normal sexual behavior for them as a couple. And he quit when she indicated, I don't want to have sex.
Right. The background here is there is a divorce going on. You had sent us a statement that said nobody really knows her reason why she went to the police, made these false allegations. What is your opinion in cases like this where somebody makes false allegations against their spouse while they're going through divorce?
I've done a lot of divorce cases. Don't do them anymore. But one thing I learned over the many years that I did them is divorce really brings out the worst in people. And some men, some women will try to use allegations against the to-be former spouse in order to gain an advantage in a divorce situation. Sometimes they're custody questions that weren't here, but sometimes it's just putting significant pressure on the other party with criminal allegations in the middle of the divorce. It's nasty stuff.
The ex-wife made allegations against a previous husband, similar ones, right? And he ended up going to prison, is that correct?
He did. In his case, he pled guilty. Now, I don't know whether he pled guilty because he feared the consequence of going to trial if he would happen to lose, because these trials can be difficult to win, very difficult. So I don't know all the circumstances of that. I do know that she had an ex-husband who ended up in prison.
Now, you brought up a very good point. The previous husband pled guilty. He was unsure of what might happen if he went to trial.
That may have been the case. I can't say I know that.
Okay, but usually when somebody pleads guilty, they're afraid of what the worst could be.
Sometimes they're just guilty, okay? So I can't say I know. I know that in her previous marriage, the guy went in, pled to some lesser charge than was originally charged, did a couple of years in prison on the East Coast.
In this circumstance, in this case with Craig, he refused to plead guilty, correct?
Yes, he did.
And what do you advise a client in, this is a very tenuous situation. I mean, you could go to prison in Colorado for life. What do you advise a client up front to say, you know, I'm going to take this to trial because you want to go to trial, you want your day in court? What do you say to them?
Craig was not going to put in any plea which indicated that he had behaved inappropriately sexually with his wife, whether it was a misdemeanor, felony misdemeanor, or anything else. He wasn't going to do it because he said, I did not do this. I will not plead guilty. Okay? One of the things I have done many times as a defense attorney in this situation is say, you want to take a polygraph? Now, the first second or two after I ask that question can really be telling. I can get the response, no, that stuff doesn't work. I can get the response, no, it's not, can't use that in court anyway, can you? I can also get the response, sure, I'll take a polygraph.
Okay, those three responses, who's the most innocent? Who do you believe?
The person who really quickly says, I'll take a polygraph, and I've had this in more than one case, and this was the case with Craig. He said, sure, I'll take a polygraph, and he came up clean. Sometimes a prosecutor, if they're being fair, even though that can't be used in court, polygraphs are used as an investigative tool. The fella I used for so long, he learned his craft with the FBI for 30 years. They use it as an investigative tool, really depend on it. And it's good to have somebody who's independent. A lot of times a prosecutor, well, this polygraph wasn't done by the police. Well, the police are guarding the fort. They can scare somebody so that you don't get a good result. You've got to be relaxed. You've got to trust the person giving the test. Long story short, in this case, Craig said, yeah, I'll take the polygraph. He did. He came up clean.
Let's talk about your strategies in trying to win this case as it proceeded.
One thing that Craig brought me, which was invaluable, was a tape that was made in December of 2016. And this was after the divorce case was filed. This was after the sex assault felony charges were filed. And we were preparing the case for trial. He brought me an audio tape where his still then wife called him up and said she wanted to have sex. And in their style as a couple, you know, she requested what they would do. She wanted hard sex. No talking, just sex, okay? He got with her. It was outside an Arby's in the car. They ended up at his apartment. They ended up having sex 3 times. Unbeknownst to her, he taped the whole thing. This is something valuable at trial because as a defense attorney, you don't have to divulge this, that you have this to the prosecution. And the reason is people are under oath. They're expected to answer truthfully. So you don't have to reveal that. What you do is, and it's what I did in this case, was I had the questions lined up. I had the tape marked because I anticipated her false testimony, which surely enough she gave. She said that never happened. I never saw him in December of 2016 in court. You stop the trial right there. Jury, you tell the judge, you need to excuse the jury. In front of the judge, in front of the prosecutor, in front of that witness on the stand, you play the tape that you have. Then the jury's brought back in. The judge says, proceed, and you're allowed to impeach with that tape, which I did, which was devastating for the prosecution because here she was saying, oh, I never saw that guy. And here's the tape. Honey, I just want to have hard sex. I don't even want any talking. Later, when they were together a couple times at his apartment, she wanted to make a videotape of their sex. So it went on and on. The jury heard this. She was impeached with it. She had, after that event in cross-examination, I'd say about 0 credibility.
Let me ask you, while this is going on in court, after the jury hears this tape, the prosecutor must realize he's lost his case.
I think he could see his ship sinking.
At that point in time, would a smart prosecutor approach defense counsel and say, let's talk?
There wasn't no talking on this case.
Even at that point in time?
Even at that, Craig wasn't going to plead to anything. If you want to dismiss your case, go ahead. I'm not going to object. If you say, as a prosecutor, I'm making a motion to dismiss, my response as defense attorney at that time would be, no objection. But I didn't hear that, and we proceeded.
Why wouldn't he dismiss it?
I don't know. It goes to the declension, perhaps, of determined. I'm determined. You're stubborn. He's bullheaded. He was bullheaded.
So tell us the end result. What happened?
In my recollection, it was about a 15-minute verdict. This jury went out. Now, it might have been 20 minutes, but they came back in very quickly, not guilty on both counts.
As a defense attorney, typically, if a jury goes out and comes back real quickly, what does that mean usually?
Juries can quickly make up their mind either way. You don't know. I don't jinx myself I didn't do it when I was a prosecutor. I've never done it as a defense attorney. Where I predict verdicts. You don't know what they're going to come up with. And I have, as a prosecutor, I once had a 6-minute verdict. So you can't say, well, a quick verdict's going to be this or that. You just really never know.
Did you win that case, the 6-minute one?
I did.
We have with us today your client, Craig. So let's bring him on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce Craig Booth to the show. Welcome to the show, Craig.
Thank you for having me.
You went through hell and back. And what I admire the most about you is, in most criminal cases, as Ron has said, a lot of people are guilty. A lot of people will take a plea. A lot of people will take a plea just because they might be found guilty even though they're innocent. but you stuck by your guns. Why'd you stick by your guns?
It was very, very difficult. And in my mind, I never told Ron, but in my mind, a lot of things play through different scenarios. But I knew I was innocent. And I knew I put my, obviously, trust in my attorney to, do due diligence and work hard. But at the same time, in my heart, I knew I was innocent.
How long had you been married?
Not very long, just a few years.
And how was the marriage going?
There were good and bad times. I mean, but to be honest, the bad times definitely outweighed the good times, obviously.
When did you learn that her previous husband had been convicted or taken a plea and gone to jail for sexual assault or some sexual crime? Did you learn that in the beginning of the marriage, or
In the beginning.
What did she say?
How he was addicted to sex and all these other type of things, and he was abusive and had all these issues going on. But she would talk about certain fights that would occur and how she didn't want to be separated from him, and in front of her kids this abuse would happen, and so on and so forth. Well, she talked about these sexual allegations that occurred. Obviously he pled guilty, and she said he served over a year on a 10-year sentence. And I believed everything she said. I don't know the situation. I come into it with an open mind thinking this is my future wife, and I felt sorry for her. Oh my goodness, I can't believe you went through that.
Do you think that she told you to serve as a shot across the bow, a warning shot to you, don't do this to me?
No, I think for her, in my personal opinion, is she was very good at being the victim her entire life since young childhood, and related to sexual issues. And it allowed her to have power and other people to feel sorry for her and to use those type of things to control the relationship.
So she did that with you in your relationship too?
In ways, yes. Yeah. Obviously, towards the end, very much so.
Having gone through the justice system, what do you think about it?
I mean, I'm glad it turned out the way it did, obviously. But to go through that, to be arrested, I didn't know what was going on. I was kind of blindsided, arrested at work. Spent a few days before I saw.
And you were brought to the station, put in a jail cell. How long were you in jail before you bonded out, right?
Well, I was in the holding cell and interviewed by the detective, and then I was later transported to Adams County Detention Center, or the jail there, and I was there for, I think, 4 days before I bonded out.
And during that time, when you came back to work, what did UPS say to you?
I talked with, at the time, the manager with HR, let him know about the charges, what they were, and he just asked if I was convicted of anything. No, obviously, I'm waiting for trial. We had just a quick discussion. He said, let me know what the outcome is.
You were very fortunate, because there are employers out there that would have fired somebody just for the hint of impropriety, right? And that happens all the time, doesn't it, Ron?
It does.
How has your life changed now? I mean, I understand you're remarried. I understand you have 2 new kids. But how has your perspective on life changed?
To go through the situation that I did in the scenario, it's very scary. So many thoughts and feelings run through your mind daily, and charges and trials don't just happen like that. It's a year, sometimes longer, before you go before a jury.
So this is hanging over your head.
During that time, my life was hell, but I definitely pray daily to try to keep strength and to push through, because there's so many thoughts, what ifs run through your mind. And it's always, I guess, in your mind playing games with you, as you're sitting there, because I know this didn't occur, but I know that people can be wrongfully convicted of crimes that they didn't commit. But now, afterwards, it's definitely made me appreciate life and opportunities, but it definitely makes me wary of certain situations and people, especially today, the political side of things. You see so many things outside, and it just makes me wonder, like, what are they feeling? What's going on in their mind? And how people will use certain things to manipulate for their political gain. Luckily, I didn't have any of those type of situations, but, you know, I have a very strong, and I'll get in, I don't want to say arguments, but definitely debates with people about situations with, for example, the Me Too movement, you know, and believe all women. Well, how about believe all the evidence?
Oftentimes in the judicial system, what we are taught since we are young, that you are presumed innocent until proven guilty, is not reality.
It's not at all. Yeah. Absolutely not.
So what do you think about the opinion that Ron did for you and getting you acquitted?
I feel very fortunate and blessed to have come across Ron. I reached out to an attorney from my hometown and asked him, obviously being hours away from where I grew up in Alamosa, Colorado, he recommended Ron. He said, hey, reach out to this gentleman. You know, I think he can handle your case, and I've heard good things about him. I reached out to Ron, and Ron took the reins from there, and really it was tough because at the beginning it was her word against my word, honestly, which is tough to prove anything.
What gave you the idea of doing that audio tape?
You know, at the beginning, I'm telling Ron, and Ron's like, you know, that's great that you have all these stories and so on and so forth, but it's just your word. I need some type of evidence. And so I'm thinking, how can I prove this? You know, how can I go back and prove that? Well, when Susan had called me and said, hey, we're only married for a couple more days, and she's very, very religious. She didn't want to have sex after the divorce, which most Christians, strong Christian faith, you know, premarital, outside of marriage, to have sexual intercourse is a sin. And so she knew the days were coming up till the divorce was final. And she called up and wanted to have sex the last couple days before it was final.
Maybe God was playing in her life, right?
I definitely have faith in my Heavenly Father and in Jesus Christ as well. But to those extremes, you know, I thought, okay, you know, and Ron said, I just need anything, something, what can help to prove? And so when she offered that, as soon as she called me, I knew immediately in my mind, I have to record this. You know, whatever she says, I don't know what she's going to say. I don't know what she's going to do. But I recorded our meeting at Arby's.
How did you record it? On
my cell phone, yeah. I just kind of held it in my hand. It's not the greatest quality of audio, but I did record that. And then,
impeachment by iPhone.
when we left Arby's, she said, you know, I just want to go to your place, have hardcore sex, no talking, no this or that, just hardcore sex and go to bed because I have work the next morning. When we left Arby's, I said, okay, played it off. Okay, let's a quick kiss. She said, sure. So she leaned forward, we kissed, and I grabbed my iPhone and took a quick picture, selfie with the two of us kissing, and pinpointed that with GPS, of course, as you can with photos. And we turned that in as evidence as well. But then she came over to my place. You know, I recorded her coming up to the house. The only thing I had previously was just a photo of us at a ball game before the trial. And obviously, it was 2 weeks before I got arrested, approximately. I think I got arrested like mid-September, and those pictures are from end of August. Happy as could be, smiling, going with me, came over to my house. You know, I was trying to, in my mind, gain evidence, but at the same time, going through a divorce, you know, why are we going through? I didn't know I was having any type of charges at that point, so I didn't know I was gaining evidence, right? But I took these pictures thinking, well, this might help save our marriage. You know, I figured she just moved out, and I never thought those charges were coming at all.
Well, thank God you did that. Just a quick question. You know, it seems like you're a religious person. It seems like your ex-wife is a religious person. And I admire the fact that they don't, you know, you and her maybe don't want to have sex outside the marriage, but did the Heavenly Father ever speak to her and say to her, it's wrong to make false allegations against you?
Well, and I think that's where her playing victim or feeling that she's a victim. And I think, honestly, she feels she is a victim of a lot of things. And from her previous husband to experiences that she's had that she shared with me, I feel like she's gone through things, but once you kind of start that path, sometimes I feel like it's easier to kind of go with that. And you realize how to manipulate maybe the justice system or a divorce with those type of allegations as well.
Yeah, well, thanks. The justice system worked for you, and thanks for being on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
in criminal cases, and you've represented a lot of people in criminal cases, some police, not all police, some prosecutors, not all prosecutors will pursue a case that has no merit whatsoever. You know, people are human. When a person is arrested for a crime, you often hear lawyers, defense lawyers, criminal defense lawyers say, don't say a word. The cops will say, what are you hiding? If you're innocent, just tell us this, we'll let you go.
Couple of reasons. Detectives can have an agenda. And it's one of the worst things they can do is to prejudice the case by thinking, I believe this guy did this, without saying, just let me look at all the attendant facts or all the allegations and all the defenses. That's one thing. Another thing is this. A lot of times a detective really won't have what they need to file. They figure the guy did it, they're not sure, but they want what I call the 95% confession. Yes, I was there with them. Yes, it was at this time of day. You know, it was, in fact, that person. Yes, we were drinking. Yes, we kissed. But I didn't do anything. They give they go 95% of the way to a confession and then just stop at the end and say, well, but I didn't do this. Now, that can be a valid story, but I call it the 95% confession because when people make the choice to go ahead and give that story, and when there are enough other circumstances that indicate guilt, they're not doing themselves any favors, and they have to be proved guilty. They don't have any obligation to testify against themselves. Shut up already.
I would ask you to advise some of the other pressure techniques that law enforcement pushes against people who have been arrested, meaning they put them in the lockup. You get one call, right? You can call a lawyer. A lot of people don't have lawyers. They don't know who to call. Maybe they don't have any money. They're assigned a public defender, right? But that stress of being locked up, they know that stress works against you, right? And they do that intentionally, don't they?
Yes, it's also hard not to talk. If you stand mute, if you refuse to say anything, that's fine, and it's entirely legal to do. But as we almost have an instinct as humans to respond to questions. Well, what about this? And particularly a skilled detective is going to make somebody try to feel comfortable. I mean, if that's the choice, maybe they're playing good cop, bad cop. There are a lot of different techniques that can be used. But it's harder, really, to be quiet and not respond. Also, a lot of people think, look, I'm really smart. I can give my story and I can talk my way out of this. Mm-hmm. And that can be tough to do.
Cops love those kind of people, don't they?
Oh, yeah. Because the more you say, if you're not telling the truth, you know, a tangled web we weave, as Shakespeare said.
Yeah, you mentioned sometimes cops don't have all the evidence they have to convict it, hoping they're going to get that 95% confession.
Or a complete confession.
A great percentage of people that they arrest, they don't have the evidence to convict them. They're hoping to assemble it after that. That's legal, isn't it? Search warrants, they can go get information,
sure,
which puts a lot of pressure on the person who's locked up in jail. The headline on the newspaper is man accused of sexually assaulting his wife or whatever, right? And that can be devastating, can it? Oftentimes employers will fire somebody right away.
It's an awful lot of pressure on an individual. In this case, Craig Booth faced an awful lot of pressure. He was really, I think, courageous in sticking to his guns. And he just said, no, we are going to trial. I did not do this, despite the potentially devastating consequences.
I've come across this sentence again and again. A lot of times, people assume when they're dealing with the police that the police are good guys. And a lot of them are good guys. But they automatically assume they're good guys, that the court system is a good system, that you would never be charged unless you were guilty, right? I would like to say the sentence, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that you cannot assume that anybody in law enforcement or everybody in law enforcement is a good guy, right?
Well, they're not working for you. Very often they do have an agenda. I remember doing a trial once where the prosecutor, she said in cross-examination, well, if that was the case, why didn't you go to the police? As if going to the police, it was the fairy godmother who was going to straighten everything out. No. The police, particularly after somebody is charged, they have an agenda to push that towards conviction. Seen it as a prosecutor and as defense attorney.
And that's a problem because their egos and their reputations are on the line. They don't want to look like they made a mistake. Like, I will guess that in Craig Booth's case, prosecutor never called you up and said, I'm sorry, we shouldn't have brought this case.
No, I've never gotten that phone call.
Well, you shouldn't be getting that phone call.
Yeah, well,
In a fair system.
I gotta tell you, I took the word should out of my vocabulary about 30 years ago.
I'll try doing that too. So, you get a lot of calls because you're a successful criminal defense lawyer, right? How do you determine the cases that you're taking these days?
Well, look, the truth is, most of your clients are guilty. Don't kid yourself. Criminal defense lawyers, I only defend the innocent, well, you don't have a lot of work. But it happens. And criminal defense lawyers say among themselves, that's the worst kind of client. Good Lord, I better win this trial. So, very often what you're trying to do with the client who is guilty, and if they will admit that, look, let's try to work this out. Let's do this plea. Let's try to get you a probationary sentence, whatever. But, I mean, as a criminal defense attorney, you can't be unrealistic about what's really going on with criminal events.
I want to thank you for being on the show, and congratulations on that victory.
Thanks so much. Good to be here, Steve.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.